Today's episode is brought to you by Positively Productive Systems, whose mission is to be the antidote to your stress and to provide compassionate productivity resources and coaching that help you heal and achieve. Be sure to check out both free and paid resources at positivelyproductive.com/resources. Think of it like when you have a power outage. You want to reduce the demands you're placing on yourself as though you are out of power. You want to reduce the pressure quickly, like a quick release valve. So, in a power outage, consider this. Power goes out and you grab a generator. You don't use the generator to power everything. You use the generator to power the most critical things, heat, appliances, things like that, a little bit of light. So, same goes for energy management, especially in this case. You are looking right now for the absolute must-dos, certain bills, paying your taxes, whatever it is that you absolutely have to do. Everything else can wait. You're listening to the Positively Living Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Zaratny, founder of Positively Productive Systems and a productivity coach certified in positive psychology and stress management. Join me as we explore ways to live a more proactive, positive life, with episodes on productivity, self-awareness, mindset, entrepreneur life, habits and systems, simplicity, fun, and more. I understand overwhelm personally as a multi-passionate entrepreneur, wife and mom to kids and cats, and as a caregiver. I'm here to help you choose what's right for you so you can do less, live more, and breathe easier. Sound good? Let's get to it. Welcome to the Positively Living Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa, and I love questions. I'm a questioner, according to Gretchen Rubin's 4 Tendencies. And in addition to constantly asking why, for your benefit and mine, I also love answering questions too. I appreciate the challenge and the encouragement to reflect, which is probably why I love coaching so much. In my social media and in every episode, I encourage you, I welcome you to message me with your questions and thoughts, and I'm excited to answer some of those questions today. You should know I respond personally to all messages sent to me, and if you want to keep something private, I'm happy to do so. That's actually my default. Today I'm sharing a similar set of questions, which I'm keeping anonymous because I think my responses can be helpful for us all. The 3 questions I'm answering involve overwhelm, being overwhelmed while sorting through things, overwhelm learning new things, and dealing with extreme, paralyzing overwhelm along with depression. Question number 1. How do you sort out everything when you're overwhelmed? I know a core principle is to start small, but what does that look like when your brain is drowning and life is so overwhelming and you don't know where to start? And here's my answer. This is something I deal with daily as a productivity coach. There are a few steps needed, but order is important, especially when you feel so overwhelmed. The precursor to my answer is a foundational step. You must take care of you first. Have you slept? Had some food? Are your basic needs taken care of? Your energy is key, and you want your nervous system calm as you begin to tackle all of these things and get beyond this overwhelm. After that, here's what I recommend. Step 1 is a mind sweep to capture all the to-dos and plans and projects and concerns, everything that's weighing on you, that's on your mind, that's grabbing your attention. And you want to put it in a safe place so you can sort and prioritize it as you are able. I have 2 freebies that help with this kind of mind sweep. One is a guided audio that will walk you through the process in under 5 minutes. And if you like listening to direction, you'll love this audio. If you prefer written directions, or you'd like both, you'll want to try the Focus File workbook, which is part of the Positively Productive Toolkit. You can download this PDF to print out, or you can upload it to your computer or iPad, pull it into something like GoodNotes if you prefer to work that way. You'll find both of these resources on the resources page of the Positively Productive website, positivelyproductive.com/resources. In a mind sweep, what you're doing is collecting tasks and thoughts in one spot. So you clear and calm your mind. This is not a to-do list. It's a to-choose list. This action is meant to clear your brain so you can focus better on making choices. And if you'd like to learn more about this technique in a podcast episode, be sure to check out episode 228 on how to avoid forgetting things when life gets hectic. Step 2 is a collection of mini steps intended to declutter what isn't necessary on that capture list. Sometimes once you get everything out of your head and somewhere safe and you start to review it, you realize that these what you thought were to-do list items are actually no longer necessary or applicable, and you can delete them. This is a time when you need to be ruthless about what belongs. Consider your personal and professional resources. Sometimes you realize things don't fit, or maybe they no longer fit, and that's okay. Sometimes a thing can wait a little while or even a long time. And so with that, you want to intentionally delay it and set a reminder so your mind can let it go for a bit. That's another way to make space. You can also review this list for delegating opportunities. It's not necessarily you that has to do it. It can get done in another way. And one of the quickest ways to get stuff done is by having someone else do it. Step 3 involves prioritizing. And the saying, if everything's a priority, nothing is a priority, is key here. You need to be honest with what you have to work with in terms of your resources, in terms of your energy, and then determine what needs tending to first. Review this modified collection of thoughts, tasks, plans, whatever it is. You want to look at it through the lens of what you can do, what you need to do, what you want to do, and perhaps simply what you're able to do currently. What resources are you working with? Are there deadlines attached to some of these? Consider which needs to come first. And if you have ones that are similar, so it's kind of a tie, consider then which thing will help make everything else feel easier. At this point, you've created a real to-do list out of all of the overwhelm, and now you can apply classic productivity techniques to tackle these efficiently and effectively. And if you'd like to listen to a podcast episode that digs into these steps in more detail, be sure to check out episode 69 on tackling your to-do list in 4 simple steps. Question number 2. How do you avoid being overwhelmed with learning and using new systems? I keep trying different things, but then it's just one more thing on my to-do list and I get overwhelmed. Any advice? Thanks. Here's my answer. First of all, thank you for listening to the podcast and asking this question. It's an important one because while we may need to embrace change and learn new things, we don't want that to become yet another item on the to-do list. So that's tricky because a new system is technically a to-do list item because you're learning and it takes more brain energy and possibly even more steps than what you were doing before. It depends on your old system and what you're used to doing. And while there's nothing wrong with any of that inherently, it may be the price of priming your productivity with a new and better system. It can become a problem when you keep changing and trying new things without giving it sufficient time. A learning curve requires more energy, so you need to be selective about where you add one in. Once you decide, you need to dedicate that time and energy and give yourself time to practice it, to lock it in, to make it a habit. Many times I see clients try something new with this unrealistic view that it's going to fix all the problems and then it's going to happen fast. They'll waste their energy by going into the new system fast and furious and give up because the newness makes them feel like it's not working. You don't want to confuse something being unfamiliar with something not working. So when you jump into a new system and then give up fast because you think it's not working, it's kind of like cranking the heat with the window open. It's a lot of wasted energy. And task switching, which we like to call multitasking, which is debunked, is a similar problem. We lose focus, time, and energy with each and every switch. So you want to consider that when you're considering a new platform. So when trying these new systems, you are using energy without getting the chance to reap the results the system could offer. My advice here is to avoid the constant switching and the waste that happens as a result by focusing first on the process so that you can better choose a system that will fit and then figure out what feels intuitive to you so you can be selective about that system and have the best chance of it being successful. And then once you decide, asking yourself what the most basic version of the system is that works for you. So let's get into the steps and some more details about that. Step one is to lay out the process first, which means figuring out what you're trying to do. What are you trying to track and how will the information and ideas come to you? What are you doing? Okay, this could be done with a notebook, mind mapping, writing out ideas on a whiteboard. I do a lot of this work in my Rocket book, and so I can sketch something out and then save it or erase it and redo it. The key is to pick the easiest way for you to sketch out the framework and steps of what you're trying to do. Is it a CRM, or is it a way to collect your recipes, or is it a way to control your content on social media, or is it a way to keep track of family events? Whatever it is, lay out what you're trying to organize and how. And this is actually the hardest part. It's the one that we want to skip because it is so challenging, but it will help you make a better choice of the type of platform to use, especially when you match it to how you work best, which is something that I work on with clients all the time. That's the key to customized productivity. It's not only what you want to achieve, but how you're going to work best and then matching up a platform to go with it. Now, step two, you want to think about the platforms you like and what kind of user interface calls to you. Asana is a great example, and full transparency, when I first looked at it, I ran the other way. I still kind of give it a wide berth because it feels like a lot to me. Not that it is, it just feels that way. Even despite the fact that my good friend Kristen Latini of the Build Your Own Fairy Tale podcast loves it, and she was on the podcast to talk about it. So if it's something you're curious about, she can help you understand that better. I do highly recommend it for some types of businesses. My friend Ruby had a product-based business, and she used it very successfully. So depending upon what you're doing, if you have teams and you're working with products, something like Asana could work really well. Also, ClickUp. It's figuring out how you like to work and what systems feel intuitive. I have a collection of podcast episodes about things like Asana, ClickUp, Trello that you can listen to if these are ones that you're considering, and see what feels like a match to you. I'll tell you right now that one of my favorites, even though it kind of feels old school to me at this point, is Trello. And the reason I love that is because I'm a Kanban gal, and Kanban is like the Post-it note thing where you have columns and you move cards around. I like that visual. It feels good to me, so I tend to use it. With step three, you pick a platform and then choose one thing to track. Choose the most basic setup you can. This is where the bells and whistles and the potential for complexity can really trip you up. This is what we want to avoid. Just as you do with habits, you need to start small and simply. What do you need it for the most right now? What's the most basic thing you can do that will really help you? Do you need to track clients or maybe to-dos? Do you need to capture information and then be able to search for and access it? Keyword search is like my best friend at this point. One client I worked with used Evernote to collect information for a book, and a colleague I know used Notion for the same purpose. Different platforms can do the same thing. It's about figuring out the one that feels good to you and then really starting simply. Here's some examples from my life of how I moved from one system to the next, and I tried out things in a really simple way. I originally started with Evernote because a VA had taught me how to use it, and I started with recipes of all things. And I know that sounds funny, but it was a great way to consistently track what I was collecting and to be able to find it through keyword searches. So I would continually add new notes with links and pictures and basically a multimedia collection of recipes. And that's all I did for the first year that I used the platform. Now, obviously, if you have more urgency in terms of creating a platform, you want to do it faster. But for me, I was trying it out because I had other things that I was using and I took my time, and it really helped me learn how to use the platform without pressure. I focused on collecting information. And by the way, this is where I began my foray into Instant Pot meals. So message me if you want a foolproof way to hard boil eggs. I started doing those in the Instant Pot and it was a game changer. Never looked back. Best way to do it. So let me know if you'd like to know. All right. So I ended up shifting over to Trello with all those recipes. Plus I use Trello for my business as well. It took a while, but with Trello, I started with a coach who knew how to use it, and we collaborated on a board together. So that's a great way to try out a platform, very low risk. We worked together on that one board for a while until I got used to the platform, and then I was able to move my information into it. And now I use it for a business dashboard and to track my features as a guest on shows, and also for my social media content, as well as still my recipes. I also have a tried and true chocolate buttercream card that I would be happy to send your way. Some other platforms I use include ClickUp, and I do that with my team for podcast production because that's what they use. And again, it works for our collaboration. So all this to say, it's okay to try out new things this way. It's really easy to try out a platform when you can collaborate with someone who already knows how to use it. And it's okay if you have multiple platforms depending upon the type of work that you want to do. Just approach it in a way where it's like, this platform feels good intuitively, and approach it in a way that's super simple so that it can reduce your risk and it can boost your familiarity with the platform much more quickly as a result. All right, question number 3. How do you deal with the overwhelm and depression that hits? Some days it's paralyzing. Okay, here's my answer. And the first is, this question is a really big scope question. And some of it I can't speak to because I don't know the particulars of your situation and I'm not a licensed therapist. As a life coach and a business owner and a mom and a wife and a woman in a world that has a lot of stress, I get what you're saying. I get it professionally with clients and I get it personally having dealt with my own overwhelm and trauma, which we've talked about here in the podcast. So first things first, I get it. You're not alone. And I encourage you to take a deep breath, and then I'll share some more thoughts with you on maybe some things that you can consider doing next. So I realize breathing can seem very simple and even an oversimplified solution, but it really does help to calm your nervous system. And it's a small but important step. Let's take one together. And each time you feel this overwhelm, be sure to breathe first and then decide what to do next. We're going to inhale through our nose and out our mouths, landing a little longer on the exhale, trying to push out that air. You ready? All right. Inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth, blowing out all your air. All right, and now start to breathe regularly. And I'll give you my first thought, which is a question. Are you seeking professional support? If depression is part of the overwhelm, such that you've identified it in your question to me, this may be a direction that you want to consider first and foremost. You may want to make this your priority. While I've been told my coaching help is therapeutic, I know that coaching and other things may soothe us, but they're not a replacement for true therapy. It's a personal choice, but I do recommend it if you're struggling. Beyond that, consider this. First, you want to find a way that takes your body out of the stress response that you're feeling, whether it's chemical or emotional or both. You are locked up and your mind is paralyzed because it wants to protect you. The deep breath we did is a good start, a small start, but a good one. Obviously, it's not the full answer. You need to let your body know that it can stand down. You can do this through more intentional and specific breathing and stretching. You can do it with music. That does it in a big way for me. Laughing. Okay, yeah, also that. Humor is pretty much my answer to a lot of things. Dancing, exercise, just any kind of exercise actually to release the stress that's trapped in your body. And also things like grounding and being in nature. We've talked about all of these things on the podcast. So taking a break, taking a walk in nature, getting the negative energy out. Or if you're exhausted, may I remind you that you want to rest and nourish yourself. These tips are similar to what I said in question number 1 of this episode, but I think it's a little more important even when you are feeling such extreme overwhelm and it may be mixed with deep anxiety or depression. Number 2, once you are physically calm and you can focus, take a look at what you're trying to push yourself to do and start reducing that heavily. It's similar to what we talked about in question 1. You want to reduce what's in front of you. However, in this case, if you are so overwhelmed that even doing a guided mind sweep, a capture, prioritizing, doing those things that I mentioned feels like too much, you want to consider reducing it in an even simpler way. Think of it like when you have a power outage. You want to reduce the demands you're placing on yourself as though you are out of power. You want to reduce the pressure quickly, like a quick release valve. So in a power outage, consider this. Power goes out and you grab a generator. You don't use the generator to power everything. You use the generator to power the most critical things, heat, appliances, things like that, a little bit of light. So same goes for energy management, especially in this case. You are looking right now for the absolute must-dos, certain bills, paying your taxes, whatever it is that you absolutely have to do. Everything else can wait. And this approach only needs to be temporary. This is a stopgap to help you get through and beyond this extreme overwhelm. But it's an important practice I want you to have ready to put into place because life can throw us these crazy curveballs, and being able to stop and say, okay, it's generator time is really important because it will help you get back on track. So you don't have to give up all that you're doing. What you're doing is deferring that so that you can make space for healing and recovery. If you'd like support with ideas on how to reduce stress and move past this level of overwhelm, you'll definitely want to check out the trauma and grief and stress management playlists with tons of podcast episodes about these topics. You'll find those on the podcast page of the Positively Productive website, positivelyproductive.com/podcast. As we wrap up today's episode, keep this in mind. Even when the overwhelm differs, the approach to help is very similar. Take a moment to care for you. Approach the situation with self-compassion. We all go through this. Gather, declutter, and make space so that you can focus and decide what needs to be next. I hope these questions and their answers today remind you that you are not alone and that you can get beyond the overwhelm in a very simple way. Speaking of questions, do you have any to add to this? Any thoughts on this episode or others? It can be to this topic or any other that we've talked about on the podcast. I would welcome you to message me. You can do so via the Connect page on the website or on Instagram at positively_Lisa and let me know your thoughts. Thank you for joining me today. Your time is precious and limited, and I'm honored you chose to spend it with me. If you have feedback, questions, or want to schedule a chat, head to positivelyproductive.com/connect. And if you are looking for any of the resources referenced on the podcast, from books to products to training and more, go to positivelyproductive.com/resources.